Mm. Right. All right. So welcome to today. It's Monday, the 28th of November. I sent this out early this morning saying that we're going to continue with the MERN app. Um, I do have the GitHub repo through. I think it's through the second day that we did on that. So if you have problems, that's fine. Now, as it says there, as far as the notes, I don't want to sit and read to you. I'm not going to do any more GitHub unless I have to. We'll see. The idea was that you were going to have to do part of this. This has turned into kind of quickly into a project from hell. I'm doing the best I can on it, and I'm hoping that we can get done everything I want to get done on it. I am combining something that I took from an online class with something I did on my own with something that I'm doing brand new. So we'll see how it works. As it says, I plan on ending today's lecture no later than 2:15 to 2:30 because I want to get your stuff graded. I did put out a lecture on Wednesday of last week where I did go through the React weather app using class components. All right. And I don't know if it was because it was Wednesday and it was the day before Thanksgiving, or I didn't do a good enough job of announcing it, but there was no one present there. So, it wasn't that long of a lecture because there were no questions or anything. So, all right. And finally, as it says, I have not heard from Evan, but he has said that especially as we get later on in the semester, that it's important that we all attend these monthly meetings, and it's always the first Thursday of the month. And since Thursday is the first, if indeed we do have a meeting, and I should be able to let you know by no later than Wednesday, but if we do have a meeting, then we won't start our class until 12:45. All right, so I'll just leave it right there. What I'd like you to do by Sunday of this week is to turn in what you've done so far. And even if it doesn't work, I want to make sure that people are doing work. That's why I said I don't want to just keep putting GitHub repos out there, because if I do that, people are just going to be turning in the repo, and that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. All right. Now, not the people who are listening directly, but again, some of the rest of you are behind, a little behind to a lot behind. You know who you are. I'm not going to say another word except for the fact today is what, day 67. So there's 13 days after today. All right. That Wednesday the last Wednesday we meet, which is the 14th, which is, believe it or not, it's about like 2 weeks from Wednesday. All right. I'm hoping by that day or by midnight that night that everybody will have in all the work that they have due. And the reason I say that is Thursday, that'll allow me to not only get grades done, but there's a whole bunch of forms and a bunch of other stuff I've got to fill out. And otherwise, that'll take me all day Friday. But either way, that's okay. But just in case there's a problem with what anyone has turned in, if you've got to turn in by Wednesday, I can turn it around and try to get it back to you so you've got Thursday to work on it. Friday, usually it varies. It's either by 8 o'clock or by 12 noon, we have to have grades in. And there's nothing we can do about that. In fact, for some reason, last semester when I did all this, I didn't have one of my thing of work ethic grades turned in, and I got hammered like crazy from the people in the main office. So I want to really make sure that by noon, I've got 4 sets of grades to turn in. The regular grades and the work ethic grades for your class, the regular grades and the work ethic grades for the C# class. All right. Now, it's been a while, and I do realize that, but I also realize that the last time that we worked on this, there were errors in the movie page, movie.js, and there were errors in the home screen.js. I have fixed the errors. So what I'd like you to do, and some of these that are grayed out, we may end up removing those. I'm not worried about that right now. But if you would bring up your movie.js file, right? And I'm just going to take it from the top. I'm not going to go over the code, but I want to show you where the errors were and what the errors were. But make sure that at the top of your screen that you've got the import statements that are shown there. All right. I had a mistake in some of my code in where I had curly braces, etc. And I believe at least they've all been fixed. So I'd like to go over this first and make sure everyone's, no one has any errors on either the movie.js or the home screen.js, and then we'll go on from there. All right. So that's the ones, that's these. And then where the error was in here was down here. And the reason that we had an error down here is I didn't have that opening curly brace. I can't tell you why I didn't. I didn't. But if you look here, this is right down near the end, right before the export default movie. Make sure yours looks like this down here. I think originally I'd had this on its own line. It really and truly doesn't matter. I mean, I can come down there and hit enter there too. It's going to work anyway. But like I said, the biggest problem was I did not have that curly brace right there. And that led to like about 5 errors, not having it in there. All right. So let me do a file save all, and hopefully you've got that fixed. And let me bring up the home screen.js. All right. Again, there were some problems in here. This is not a long file, but take a look up on top here as well before we go on. All right. Make sure you've got those imports. We started to make some changes in here. Now, my hope, just so you know, was that we were going to have enough time in here that we were going to be able to get into some other stuff in React that we haven't even talked about yet. All right. And that was that we were going to be able to go in React and do some work with Redux. I just don't know if there's going to be time to do that or not. And the reason for that, it's not even so much that it's a lot of code. It's a fair amount, but it's going to take at least an entire class period to explain Redux to you. And even when I get done, it may not make a whole heck of a lot of sense. I watched 3 videos over the weekend on it, and you wouldn't have even thought they were talking about the same concept. All right, they were just that different in content. So we've got this, then we come down here, and there's our use effect and our use state in lines 6 really through about 14. What, just so you know too, what Redux does is it gives you another way that if you have a lot of work that you're doing in an application where you're doing a lot of work with either Axios or Fetch, it gives you another way to look at it. But like I said, it's a whole new paradigm. It's a whole different way of doing it. All right. So, all right. So there was the set movies. We got a fetch movies there on the bottom. And then I'll bring up the return in just a second as well. And that's it. Let me move this down a little bit, and up a little bit. So that's everything. All right. And hopefully you don't have any errors in yours either. If for some reason you do, you're going to have to let me know. All right. So we did a bunch of work last time. All right. And one of the things that we looked at in here was this thing with the number of stars. No, there's not any errors in there, but that was all that through. We went all the way from no stars all the way through 10 stars. All right. And that was just a lot of stuff to do. I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. Will we have to change it? I actually don't think so. You never know, for lack of better words. All right. So I want to go back to my home screen because I'm working here with some notes that I've taken just to make sure I'm not missing anything. That looks good. Okay. Now, as of right now, there's two different things that we can do. And what I mean by that is if you look right here, we've got right here, if I'm in back, let's do this. Let me close both of these. If I go into back end, you'll notice it's got its own package.json, right? Nothing new there. We talked about this before. All right. And we've got a node backend server, okay, that we can run either with or without NodeMon. Again, no big thing there. That's not exactly what I'd call anything new. All right. We've got both a back end and we've got a front end. So our front end has also got its own package.json in it. All right. And what I'm getting to here and what I'm trying to tell you is that technically, all right, you can't run both of them together right now, just the way that it's set up. All right. You're running basically two different processes, for lack of better words. So what I'd like you to do is open up your front end package.json file. All right, open up your front end package.json file. And right near the top, right where I am, I want us to add a new line. All right, and I want it to look like this. We'll go over what it means in just a second. With a comma. There we go. All right, we're setting up a proxy. And if you don't know what a proxy is, and you very well might, but not so much in the guise of using it with a computer application. I always look at a proxy as you're giving somebody else permission to do something. You've got my proxy. For instance, I always get this thing from my insurance company that they're going to have meetings once a year. And they tell me that if I don't send anything in, it's the equivalent of me giving them my proxy as far as them being able to vote. All right, on different matters. And it's the same kind of thing right here. We're basically letting the system know that these things should be able to run in tandem with one another. All right. So in other words, I should be able to run them both. All right. They should be able to exist. I'm not going to say so far right now in harmony, but they should be able to exist with one another. We'll get more into this later. All right. Now, I want to bring up the movie screen again, because again, I just am trying to check. Yes, yes. Okay. I don't do this thing as far as setting this up. I don't like the way that the system does that. But since I've got an auto save on it and a prettier, that's why it sets it up the way it does. All right. I guess I could turn it off. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. All right. Now, I believe that in here as well, inside of our movie screen, we're also going to have to come in here and import Axios. So I'm going to come in here, and it doesn't matter where you do it, but I'm going to import Axios from Axios. All right. Okay. So moving down then, right here, okay, we have our thing where we're setting the state. Hopefully you have this already. But again, we are using functional components. All right, so this is how we are setting state. I know that a couple of you last week had sent me things. It was just simply that you changed the word, basically you added the word class and then everything worked to go from a class component to a functional component or vice versa. There were a few changes that you had to make. All right. So we've got that. And then we've got our use effect in here. Again, I'm just double checking to make sure everything looks good. All right, we're making our call. All right. Now for this, again, this is set movie. So we're just grabbing an individual movie right here. And that's why we're giving it the ID. All right. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to try something here and we're going to see if it's going to work. So I'm just did a save on that. I'm going to close that. All right. And I'm going to go to my root folder. So I'm down here at the root right here, and I'm going to go to my from my root folder. Okay. There's a couple things that I'm going to want to add. All right. So I'm right here and I'm going to go view and I'm going to go to my terminal. All right. Now, what I'm going to add here, I'm going to add two things. They're both going to be developmental dependencies. So I'm going to do an npm I minus D, and I don't think we have nodemon on here, so I'm going to add that. But then I'm also going to add concurrently. We talked a little bit about this before. All right. But I just going to hit enter right here. All right, let me clear this. And I'm going to move this back down because I won't need it, I don't think, for a while yet. But if you do go in and you take a look in here, and if I go out to npmjs.com and I type in here concurrently, it says run commands concurrently. All right. And basically what, again, it is going to allow us to do is to run both our client side stuff and our server side stuff. All right. Okay. So again, I'm going to go to this package.json right here, and I'm going to open this up because I want to see what's in here. And in particular, I'm looking under my scripts. I've got a start script in here and my dev start, but that start script is allowing me to run, as it says, the backend server. Now, from what I just put in there, I should, with adding that concurrently, I should be able to add a few more things to this. So this is what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to put in here server, nodemon, backend, / server. And maybe, I guess probably it would look a little better to actually take this and move it up because it's just like the other one. So put it here. All right, so I've got my node backend server and my nodemon backend server. All right. All right. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in client npm start minus prefix front end. And that's just some junk, for lack of better words. It's some junk that you have to add when you're working with concurrently. All right. Now the big one is this. We're going to put in here dev, not dev start, just dev. This is going to basically say that what we want to do is we want to concurrently be able to run start here and the client here. We want to be able to run both of them. It's got kind of a weird syntax, but I didn't make it up. All right. So we start out with double quotes and we put in the word concurrently. All right. Then all this stuff we have to keep putting in backslash double quote all over the place. And again, I didn't set up this syntax. This is just the way it is set up. So we've got here concurrently, space, backslash double quote, npm run server, backslash double quote, space, backslash double quote, space, npm run client, backslash double quote. All right, I'm going to give you a second to key that in. And it's not giving me any errors, so I believe at least I keyed that in correctly. Not incorrectly, but it was done in a correct manner. Right? So I'm going to do a file, save all. All right. And then I'm going to do this, but I want to be able to run both of these. So what I'll need to do is I can run any one of them or either one of them really from my terminal here. That's fine. But then I have to open up an external terminal to run the other one. So I'm in here and I'm going to try my npm run server, and I hope I don't get any errors. Okay, so my server is running on port 5000 like it should be. That's a great start. All right, so now I'm going to come in and in here, all right, from my MERN app, I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to do a git bash here so I can open up yet another external terminal. And now I'm going to try to type in npm run client. Okay, of course it'd have an error. That I'm not going to really be afraid, concerned with right now, but I'm going to copy this. The point though is this. Yes, I'm getting an error, but I'm not getting any errors telling me that I can't run them both. All right, and that's what I would have had previously. All right, okay. Okay, let's see. So, of course, then these will have to be fixed, and we'll look at that in just a minute. All right. Now we're going to look at something I don't believe we've looked at much, if at all, this semester. So I'm going to go out to npmjs.com one more time, and I'm going to type in here .env. All right. And .env is designed to hold any environment variables that you have. And you can look at it that basically these environment variables are variables that you need in the program, but if you make your program go live, in that if you put it out on the internet, you don't want to share these variables with other people. And what do I mean? I'm talking about things like, database passwords, all right? Paths for Mongo, etc. All right, so we're going to look at all this stuff in just a second. Now, we want to go and we want to be able to add this. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and in our back end, all right, and what I mean by the back end is where we are right here. All right, so this back end, you already know this was just a second ago, at least, this was up and running. So our back end is up and running. All right. And it doesn't need to stay running, so I'm just going to stop it right there. But what I want you to understand is I'm right here. Okay, I'm not in the front end where we've got all this stuff. All right, I'm in the back end. And in the back end here, this is where I want to add that. So I'm going to say npm i.env. npm i.env. All right, and you may or may not be aware of it. This is kind of, I don't know, whoever the programmers here, their little sense of humor, because eventually what we're going to have is we are going to add a file in just a couple minutes in here that's called .env. In other words, .env. We're going to add that in just a second. All right. Now, when you do this and you use this .env file, you want to go to your back end and we want to open our server.js file in our back end. So go in the back end and open up your server.js file. You already know what's in here. We've looked at this stuff already. All right. And right near the top, I can do it, I don't know, about right here. We're going to do this. It's kind of weird, all right, the way that you have to use this. Okay. So we're going to do two things. We're going to come in first and say const .env equals require .env. That's the first one. All right, it's gray right now because we don't have an env file. All right, but after you do that, then usually one of the first, I'll just put it right here. But to use it, you have to say .env.config, like that. That's how you use it. So this is making it available. And this is saying that once it's available, use the configuration or the config method for that, for lack of better words. All right. So what do we put in there? Well, let's put a couple things in there right now. So what I'd like you to do is to click someplace in here where it's empty. Make sure you're not in the back end or the front end. So just right here. I closed them both. Right mouse click and choose new file. And this will be called .env. All right, and it should come up and it should be empty. All right, we'll put a couple things in there right now. Okay, and that is we'll put in here node env equals development. Let's spell it right. Development and port equal 5000. That's it for right now. All right. So again, these are going to be, I don't know if you'd exactly call them global variables. Usually what you see in books is they call them application level variables. All right. And if you want these to take effect, just so you know, got to do a file, save all. And one of the reasons just a second ago that I stopped that server, all right, and I could restart it now if I want to, we can go back and restart it. But the point is, if you go in and you make any changes to your .env variables, you should go back in and restart the server so that they take effect. All right. So that's all we need for now. We'll look at adding some more stuff to that later. All right. Now you've seen this before. Okay. That's where this comes from. The process.env.port. All right. That .env is the one that we just used. And we set port up in there to 5,000. Okay. Again, it's not a big thing, and I think you all get what's going on and what I'm talking about. All right. And we said hello from the back end. We can do that. All right. But normally in the past, you don't have to change yours, or you can. It's totally up to you. But normally we've said something like this here. We've gone in, we've just basically done a console.log here. In fact, not even there. No, that's down at the bottom. Down here at the very bottom where we've got this, we've already got it, server running on port. So that port right there is this port right here. All right. And we use the port in here as well. Okay. What you find, the more that you work with this stuff, the more and more people try to, it actually starts to get really confusing, because in some things you're very much encouraged to use constants. And with some of them, these constants should all be in uppercase. And then with other ones, no, it doesn't matter if you put them in uppercase or you don't put it into uppercase, etc. And that's why I said it gets really, really confusing. And speaking of really, really confusing, you may or may not have noticed that what we've been doing in here, all right, is this require statement all the time. All right. The problem is what Node does is earlier versions of Node, in fact, not even just earlier versions, many versions of Node end up using require. But if you remember, what we've been doing more with the React stuff that we've been doing is we've been using import. All right. So rather than saying const express equal require express, we'd want to say import express from express, that kind of thing. All right. So all these const statements could be changed to imports, but as they are right now, they can't be. So let's talk about what we'd have to do in order to be able to change those. All right. In this package.json that we have, and again, we want to make sure that the package.json that we're using, like I said to you before, is this one, our main one. All right. We have to make one change in order to be able to start saying import as opposed to require. All right. So under this line here that says main index.js, we add one line. And we put in here type colon module, comma. That's it. All right. So again, this was in the package.json, and it was in the package.json, I guess you would say, under the back end, not the front end one, the one that was kind of on by itself. So by putting this in here, just to show you, because it's really, it's an important concept. So if I go back down to my server.js, I can change all these, but it's a little quirky in the way that it works. So I can come in here into this one, and I can say, just as an example, I can now say import express from express. And you'll notice I don't get any errors. All right. And that's because that line I just put in. All right. And, I can do the same thing with my .env here. So I can import .env from .env. And again, you'll notice I don't get any errors. All right. So I've got those two, and that's just fine the way it is. All right. Now, with this one, if I try doing this one, if I try saying import movies from, watch what happens. I'm going to leave that line there. We'll get rid of it in a minute. But I'm going to type in import movies from, and then I'm going to say ./data/movies. And you say, that looks okay. There's going to be a problem, though, when you run the program, you get an error. And what I'm trying to get across to you is this. For any of your own files that you create, like this one, when you use import instead of require, you have to add the .js onto the end. Again, just kind of a quirky rule. I didn't make it up, but somebody did. All right. So again, all of these, when you're using basically third-party types of functions, like stuff in NPM, all right, in the Node Package Manager, you don't need to add the .js. But when you create your own stuff, then you do need it. All right. Now, what's going to happen too, just so you know, all right, I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to close this, okay? We may have introduced some errors into our program. So I want to show you what they are and how we get rid of them. All right. So let's see. In my front end here, where are we? In source, I'm going to go to movies.js with a little m right there, movies.js. And I'm going to click on that. Okay. This is the stuff that had all of our movie junk in it. All right. And you're like, well, it looks okay. Yeah, as of right now, it does. All right. Now, what I want you to understand, though, is what we have at the bottom is export default movies, which is correct. All right. And I guess I'd already made some changes, and that's why it worked. But what I want to get across to you is I'm going to show you something. Don't type this in because it's wrong. All right. But remember, when we did the module.exports equals movies, for example, you use this when you're using the require that we had been using. All right. When you use import, you don't use what's in blue. You use now what's on line 166. All right. So let's get started at least on doing some work where we're going to see if we can bring the database into this. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to make sure everything is closed right now. Okay. First thing I want to do here is, again, from here, so I'm on the server side, I better add Mongoose. So npm I Mongoose. Okay. Give that a second. And we're going to do a little bit of typing between now and the end of the period today because we're going to set up models for basically everything that we've been working with. All right. So that's fine. So let me clear that. And I'm going to move that down. There we go. All right. Now I want to be in my backend folder. All right. I want to be in my backend folder here. And I want to create a new folder under my backend folder that's called config. This is normally where you'll put some of your database stuff in. So I'm in my backend folder right here. I'm going to right mouse click on the backend folder, and I'm going to create another folder in there that is called config. Config, it doesn't matter. Make sure it's under the backend though. Then inside of config, I'm going to go in and create a new file that I'll call db.js. And again, I've mentioned this kind of thing to you before, but I'm going to say it again anyway. And that is, there is nothing special. There is nothing special about these names. They're just the standard ones that people use. If you didn't like db.js, you could call it something else. All right. Okay. So in here, this isn't going to be very long, but we're going to put a few things in here. Import mongoose from mongoose. Oops, gotta spell it right. All right. And it's great because we don't have any code in there yet. Okay. This is where we're going to tell it that we want to make our connection. Okay. All right. So, oops, const connect db equal. And again, this is the kind of thing that can conceivably take some time. The reason I'm telling you that is when something can take some time, you're going to need either a callback or a promise or async await. All right, which is all basically three sides of the same coin or whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to use async here. All right. And then we're going to put this into a try catch block. Just so you're aware of this, almost always when you do anything to try to connect to a database, it'll be put into a try catch block. It's not mandatory that you do that, but it's about as close to being mandatory as possible. All right, because stuff fails. You put a wrong path in, you don't have permissions, whatever it is. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and under my try, this will be my connection. This is again what could take some time. All right. Let's see. Now, I'm putting something in there that we don't have yet, and don't worry about it. It would maybe break, but it's okay. This thing in here is something else we're going to add to .env. All right. Why am I not adding it now? Because I don't remember what it is. When we go after the break and we go out, we look on Mongoose, hopefully I can find the line I need and then we can add that. All right. So after we do that, we can come in and console.log. And I'm going to put in here MongoDB connected. And I'm even going to put in here a little message so I know exactly. So con.connection.host. Like that. All right, what doesn't it like? Let's see. It's because that should be a curly. There we go. So it should let me know that it is connected and exactly what my host is. All we're trying to do right here is if we attempt to connect to the database and it succeeds, we want a message in our console to let us know that it succeeded. All right. Otherwise, if it fails, all right, we'll catch any kind of error and we'll do a console.err error. Oh, come on. Well, we're going to fix that in just a second. So, and I'm going to do a process. Oh my gosh, come on. Oh, where are you? And we're going to do a process dot exit, and we'll give it a 1, which means it did not finish normally. So what do we have here? Catch error. Error is up here. There we go. And then finally at the very bottom, move this down a little. We're going to say export default connect DB. Okay. So again, what we are attempting to do right here, we're bringing in Mongoose and we're attempting to connect to the database. This can take some time, so we're doing it as part of an async await. All right. This Mongo URI is basically going to be the path for our connection. That is going to, in just a couple minutes, is going to be put into here, into our .env file. And again, the reason that that is going to be done is if you remember, it has both the name of the database in it, it has the username in it, and it has the user's password rather, in it. You don't want to share information in the .env file with the outside world. That's why you may or may not remember this, but if I show you this, when we first started this, we had a get ignore file that was created for us. We added this, and we added one more line to it, and that was that line 17. So we let the system know that we did not want that to be exported, so to speak, along with our code. All right. All right, so let's go back into, in fact, let's do a file save all, and I'm going to close this for now. All right. And I want to go back in here and I want to go into my back end and I want to open up server.js. Why? Well, I want to open it up because I want to be able to access that file that we just put in. All right. We are going to need that because in here, we are going to be able, when we make calls out, etc., we're going to be able to, or need to be able to go in and use that database connection. So again, I'm going to do an import connect DB from /config/D. We need the .js. All right. I already mentioned that to you before. Now, the problem is there is nothing in our code that is calling connect DB. So in other words, we're never telling this connection to be made. So we can from here, because we just added this. So we can come down here and we can type in connect DB like that. And that will actually make the call. All right. That we need to make. Okay. Now, the only thing that we should have to do, all right, we have to fix those errors we had before, but the other thing we're going to have to do is, again, we're going to have to find that inside of here, we're going to have to go in and add that MongoDB URI, and we will do that in just a bit. All right. Okay. So the next thing to do is let's start getting ready to actually start putting in our stuff. In other words, right now, everything that we're doing is hard coded in here. You know that. Those movies, etc., are hard coded in right now. All right, under data, if you remember, we've got that movies.js. We've also got it on our front end with movies.js. We want to eventually be able to get rid of both of those because we want to grab our data from the database. All right, and we're going to do that momentarily. All right, so in the back end here, let's right mouse click on our back end folder and create another new folder that's called models. All right, this shouldn't be anything new or surprising, all right, to any of you. Okay. And inside of here, we're going to create 3 different models. All right. We're going to do this. We'll get a good start on it, and then we'll take a break at about 5 after 1. Then we'll continue on after that. So I'm just going to create all 3 files right now. So the first one that I create in here, I'm going to call it, it's going to be my users. So I'm going to call this user model.js. That's the first one under models. I'm just going to create all 3 of them right now. The second one under models is going to be movie model.js. So I now have movie model.js under models, and I have user model.js under models. Finally, I'm going to create one more because eventually we want to be able to create orders. So I'm going to have order model.js. So those are my 3 files that are underneath here. All right. And I'm going to start with user because that's basically, it's kind of what we have right now. All right. In fact, it isn't, but it's what we're going to need. And we're going to create ourselves 3 different users. Don't worry about who they are. We're not going to do that right now. But what we have to put in here in our model file is what these users, basically what they're all going to have in common, whatever you want to call it. All right. So let me close that. There we go. Give some more room here. So the first thing I want to do in here is I want to import Mongoose from Mongoose. Okay. And then we want to create our schema. You've done this before. All right. So this is going to be what all users have in common. And I gave them about 4 or 5 fields. All right. In addition, you're going to see something in here that you haven't seen before. We're going to set a feature that's in here called timestamps to true. And what that means is that whenever we create a new user, the date and time that user were created is going to be saved automatically for us without us having to go and add something else new into this. All right. So first thing we're going to have is name. And it'll be of type string. And it'll be required. And it has to be unique. All right. In fact, no, we don't even, forget that. We'll make our email unique. That's better, makes more sense anyway. So we'll do email and it'll look almost the same. So let me just copy this stuff. And we will add into here unique true. Okay. And I forgot a comma there, so that's why it's complaining. There we go. So this is what we have so far. We imported Mongoose. We're creating our schema right now. It's got a name. It's got an email. All right. And believe it or not, it's giving me this error right here because we put that comma there. Why? Because we're not done. So each user will have a name, will have an email, will have a password. All right. And this will be type string. And this will be required true. Now, we probably won't get there today, but just so you know, all right, what we're eventually going to do is we're going to hash this password, and I'll show you how to do that. And we talked a little bit about some of this stuff before, using salts, etc. We're going to go back and revisit that stuff again. All right. One more thing that we're going to want to put in here. Okay. And that is the person an administrator? So is admin. Now think about why we'd be doing something like that. If you're an end user, you can log on, you can see all the products, you can order anything you want to order, but you're not allowed to go in there and play with the stuff. For instance, you couldn't change a price. All right. You couldn't change a quantity in stock. That's for an administrator. All right. So for that, the type will be Boolean. Required will be true. We'll give it a default. So if you don't put it in, it'll just default to false. All right. Now it's complaining here. I'm trying to figure out why. Looks like I missed a comma someplace, but I'm just going to look and see where. I don't know if it wants one there. Yes, it does. So let's see. How am I expected? Not sure why it's giving me this stuff, but it is. Ah, no colon there. There we go. Or no colon there. There we are. All right, so taking it from the top, we import Mongoose. We set up our user schema. Again, virtually 100% of the time, whatever we're going to call this is our user model, so it's our user schema. Then we give it our fields or whatever you want to call it in here. All right, so we've got name, which is a string and required, email, which is a string and required and must be unique. So you can't use the same email for two different people, in other words. Password, which again is a string and required, and is admin, which is a Boolean required, and it'll default to false. Now, this is something we haven't looked at before. We're going to come in here and we're going to put in a comma. All right. And then we're going to add another. Oops, that was interesting. All right. We're going to add another curly brace in here and hit enter. And we're going to type here timestamps true, like that. Finally, we have two more lines, so I'll let you catch up. The two more lines, and then we're taking a break. So const user equal mongoose dot model user with our user schema. That was interesting. And then finally, our export default user. All right. So I want to very quickly just go over that one more time. We imported Mongoose from Mongoose. We set up our schema. Name, and I'm sorry I forgot the colons, but they're all in there now. Name colon, and then in curly braces, type string required true. Email in curly braces, type string required true, unique true. Password within curly braces, type string required true. Is admin within curly braces, type Boolean, required true, default false. Then we came back in here and we added this. All right. Which again basically said that as we are creating this stuff, we don't have to be worried about setting dates and times for it. The system will do that for us automatically. All right. Then we created basically our constant user. So we're going to be able to use what's in the model, and we exported it. All right. I'm going to do a file, save all. When we get back from the break, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our movie model. So this one will be next. I'm going to close this one and come right here. It is 106. Let's come back, please, at 1:15, and we'll pick it up right there. All right, let me get back in here then. And turn my share back on. There we go. All right, so the next one that we're going to do then is the movie model. And we're actually going to have a model within a model here because movies also have reviews. All right, so we'll start out here with an import Mongoose again. We're just going to do these for all three of these. All right, and the first thing we'll do here is have a const review schema. And then this will be nice and short. Say that so this will be each individual review that we're going to put in here. So movies will consist of a number of reviews, and these will be like what we're going to have for each individual review. So in other words, one of the things that we had said earlier, if you remember, like we said, maybe like 9 stars from 57 reviews. What we're looking at now is this will be one of those 57 reviews. We might as well put in that colon so it's there from the start. There we go. And we'll have a rating. Now you can go in and just so you know, I mean, there's things that we're not doing here that we could do. And what I mean is we could set a default for the rating if we wanted to do that. So if you didn't put anything in, it would either default to a 1 or whatever. I'm not doing that. I mean, that stuff we could do if we wanted to do. All right. Finally, we'll just put in here comment, which again will be a type string, and required true. All right. So we've got in here name, rating, and comment. And just like we did before, the same kind of way, we're going to put a comma here, and we're going to put a comma here, and another curly, and we're going to put, just like we did before, timestamps true. Now, again, this is kind of our outer. This isn't the movie one, this is the review one. But one of the components we're going to have for a movie is going to be basically, well, you'll see it in just a second. All right. So we've got this. Now let's keep working our way downwards. Okay. And we're going to come in here and I'm going to say const movie schema equals our mongoose schema. And what do we have here? We've got like that. I don't know why I didn't put those in, but it didn't. There we go. All right. And we'll have a user. Now, this is going to be information where, okay, we're going to have, this is going to look a little bit different because this, for the user, this is going to refer to whoever this is. I'm going to say that again. This user is going to refer to whoever it is up here. All right. Why might we want to do that? Well, if somebody, for example, is going to put in comments about a movie and they're going to use profanity or something like that, we might want to be able to know who it is. Or if somebody posts something else that's really considered to be derogatory or just something you shouldn't have in there, we want to be able to identify who it is. So we're going to come in here, look a little different, but we're going to put a type in here and we're going to say mongoose.schema dot types dot object ID. And you know what? You should actually all know what that is, because each user that we end up creating, they will all have his or her own object ID, which again is basically their primary key. All right. The required in there is going to be true. And we want to say who we're referring to. And it'll be user, just like that. Like I said, that one looks a little different from anything that we've done before. And then we're going to have some of the stuff like we've had before. So this will be for the movie. We'll have a name, and it'll be of type string, and the required true. Nothing new there. So we've got user, we've got name. Oops. Let's put another comma in here. Let's have an image. You know all these because we've had those images before, both in this program and in the React Movie app. So again, this will be a type string because it'll be a URL. And again, it will be required true. All right, I'm going to move that up a little. And next, we're going to have category. We may not even end up using this. I don't know. But, you know, if you remember, we had like action movie or Western or whatever. So that was a type string. And that will be another required true. Oops. And then we'll have description, which again will be a type string. And a required true. All right. Let me just double check and make sure I didn't miss anything here. Looks like it's all correct. It's not flagging anything as being in error or missing. All right. A couple more things we'll have in here. All right. The next one that we're going to have is going to be the rating. Now, again, when I put this in, that should have a comma, so I'm getting the error. All right. Made it a type number, and required was true, and I defaulted it to 0. But you could, if you wanted to, come in there and put a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 10 for the number of stars that you're going to give it. I just left it the way it was. But again, that's the kind of thing that if you wanted to, you could add something like that. All right. So next we're going to have num reviews. How many people have reviewed the movie? And again, it'll be another type number. Required true. And default of 0. All right, then the price. Sounds almost like a broken record here, but it will again be a type number. Required will be true. And, oh, forgot my curly brace there, so it's giving me an error. And the default will be 0. And finally, we're going to have the number in stock. So the count in stock, same kind of thing, though. Oops. Type number, required true, and default 0. All right. Then just like we have been doing, same kind of thing. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a comma and another curly brace, and we're going to put timestamps true. Then our other 2 lines that we have been putting in here, those being we've got to do our set up our mongoose.model and we've got to export it. So let me put those in here. So const movie equal mongoose Got model, movie, and our movie schema. And then finally, export default of, oh, put your fingers on the right keys. Export default movie. All right. So that ends it for the movie model. So what's left to do then is the order model. All right. And the order model is going to look not, of course, not identical, but it's going to look quite a bit like what we just had for movies. I could copy that in, but I don't want to do that. All right, because I know, knowing me, I'll forget to do something or I'll put in something that'll be incorrect. So again, I'm going to do a save all and I'm going to close my movie model. And now we'll go to our, well, that should have been our order model. What do we have here? View. Isn't that great? What did I do? Did I put movie under order? Let me double check this. That was just stupid on my part. So the movie model, of course, that's empty. That should be, this is the movie model right here. Hopefully you didn't do what I did. That's movie model that we just did. All right, the one we just put in. Okay, with the review on the top, etc. All right, so let me save. We now have our user model. Okay, we've got our movie model, which leaves our order model. So we're going to do that one then right now. And let me start the way we've been starting. Okay, close this by importing Mongoose from Mongoose. Now we don't have any orders yet, but this is like pre-planning or whatever you'd want to call this. So const order schema. And again, this should make enough sense that as we go through this, you should understand a lot of the stuff that we're putting in here. So for anybody who's going to order a movie, as an example, well, the first thing that would be nice to have, all right, would be who it was. So I'm going to put it in just like we did before, user. Same stuff we had before. Type mongoose dot schema dot types dot object ID required true and ref user. All right, so that's a start. Okay. Now what we need is basically the information about what's in the order. So the order items, whatever you want to call it. All right. And you really, when you look at it, we're going to basically have one of these or possibly more of these. So I'm going to put these in an array because we could have one person could order one movie, one person could order multiple movies, one person could order one copy of a movie or multiple copies of a movie, as an example. So I'm going to call this order items. And I'm going to start by making it an array. And then inside of there, we're going to have our objects. Name. How many they ordered. Picture of what they ordered. price of what they ordered. The movie itself, so that'll have an ID. That's how we know what the individual movie is. So the type will again be mongoose dot schema dot type dot object ID. And that will refer to the actual movie table. All right. Now that's just individual information about each movie that's being ordered. All right. Well, what else do we need? Well, if you're going to, if you're going to let somebody order something, it would be kind of nice to know where that thing that they ordered is going to go. So I'm going to put in here shipping address. And again, this is something that you could change if you wanted to. So if you don't like the fields that I put in here, you don't think that they're sufficient or whatever, and this is pretty long. I'm just warning you, I guess, right now. All right. We're going to have a shipping address stuff, and then we're going to have payments and some other stuff. So this is going to take a bit of time. So oops. So that is our shipping information right there. All right. Well, what's next? How about our payment information? So there's going to be a lot of little fields. And again, this could be done in a multiple number of ways. So if you don't like the way I did it, I mean, you could easily come in here and make changes yourself. So how are they going to pay for it? You know what I mean? I mean, it's typically with this, it'll be a check. Probably today, most places don't even accept checks. You know, it might be MasterCard or Visa. It might be Stripe. It might be PayPal, etc. These are all just going to be one-liners. They're all going to be type strings, so I'm not going to put them over multiple lines. We could, but just to try to keep it a little brief. All right, so that'll be our payment stuff. We're working our way down because there's about 5 or 6 more of these. In fact, I'm just going to copy this one and make changes to it. Maybe I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to anyway. So this is the one I'm going to copy because we're going to have a bunch in a row that are going to look pretty similar. Okay. We put that on one line, I guess. Doesn't matter. All right. All right. There's at least one more thing that we're going to do in here. And that is, and it'll take a little bit of time, but it's not really too bad. And that is what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take what we currently have in our data file, and we're going to want to use that as, for lack of better words, I'm not going to say we're going to call it practice data, but some of that stuff in there is going to be practice data. That's all I'm going to say about it for right now. All right. So what I'm getting to is what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go back in your data folder and open up that movies file that's in there. All right, so go into your data folder and open up that movies file. And I want you, you're going to have to do this. I think there's 10 of them in there. Remove the line that's got the ID from each one of these. And the reason for this is we're going to create our own thing that's going to put this data in for us into the database. And remember that when we put data into the database, it'll automatically add an ID for us. We could leave these in there technically, All right, but we're going to let the system do that and put those IDs in for us. I think that's all of them. I believe there were 10. Yeah, that's good. All right. All right, so I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to close that one as well, and close this. All right. Okay, then the next thing that I want to do is we're going to want to go in and we're going to want to we're going to create some users now. Okay, so we're going to start putting data in. But we want to make sure that when we put it in, remember that each user, we said this before, will have 4 properties. They'll have a name, they'll have an email address, they'll have a password, and they'll have whether or not they're an administrator. All right, and we'll want to make sure that we take the password and we hash it. All right, so in other words, we want to encrypt it, is what I'm saying. All right, so in our back end folder, so right now, I'm going to close, let me close everything here. All right, so nothing's open. So in here, in this, I want to add bcrypt. Now, let's take a look at this before we add it, because there's different bcrypts. Right there, I believe at least there is a straight bcrypt. Okay, and when we look at it, it says a bcrypt library for Node.js. Well, that sounds like it would be good. All right, it's got almost 1 million weekly downloads. All right, but it can be a little quirky to work with. All right, just so you know. So not only is there a bcrypt, there is a bcrypt JS. All right, it says optimized bcrypt in plain JavaScript with 0 dependencies, compatible to bcrypt. And if we look at that one, you'll notice it's not a lot more. It's not even double, but we could use either one of these. But the one that we're going to use is bcrypt JS. All right, so I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to come back into here, close this, and from my terminal here, just view terminal. I think this is running. Let's double check. It's not. So I'm going to just paste that in. So I'm going to have my, whoa. Okay, I thought that was in there and it wasn't. So let me clear this. I just want an npm I bcrypt JS. All right. Okay, so under our data folder that we have on the back end, what's in there right now is movies.js. That's fine. But in fact, we're going to probably be able to use that one in its current form. So let me clear this. And let me move this down. There we go. So in data, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new file in here that's called users.js. All right. And I mentioned this before, but I'm saying it again. Each user is going to have 4 fields. So we're going to make an array, and we're going to make an array of user objects in a minute. Before we do, I'm going to import bcrypt from bcrypt.js. And remember, we could have called this bcrypt.js. It doesn't matter. All right. This is just an alias for this. You typically give them the same name or something darn close like we've done here. All right. So I'm going to say here const users equal. And again, this is going to be an array. I'm going to have 3 user objects in here. So the first one, let's just call this admin user. This will be our administrator. Now you might ask right here, it's like, why don't you have a first name and a last? We can do all that stuff if we want to. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but this is already getting pretty darn lengthy as it is. All right, so I just made a thing called name. The email, these are all fictitious anyway. So I just put in here admin at test.com. Password, here's what we're going to use, bcrypt. So bcrypt.hash sync. All right. And we'll just put in, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we'll salt that 10 times. All right. So that'll be our first person that's in there. And then we'll say is admin. They are an administrator, so we'll set that to true. You may or may not have remembered, but the default for that is false. So we're going to make 2 more users. I made them Jane Smith and John Smith, but neither one of them are going to be administrators. Now, what we'll get to eventually is you could go in and as an administrator, you could give somebody administrator permissions if you wanted to. All right. I'm not going to do that, but I mean, like I said, again, you could do that if that's indeed what you wanted to do. All right. So let's add 2 more of these. I can just copy it down and then make a couple changes. So let me put a comma here. Paste that in. I don't want this to be admin user. So I made this Jane Smith. And this was Jane Smith at test.com. We could leave this the same. I'll just tell you what, I'll make it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And they're not an administrator. Since false is the default, we don't have to even put anything in there. And now we have John Smith. You call these whatever you want. All right. And I'll make this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So we've got all that stuff in there now. So that's our users. So the only thing we have to do is export default users. Okay. Now we're not going to make one for orders. We could, all right, but we're not going to make one for orders. Okay, we are going to try to do something now, and I have to warn you that what we're going to try to do when we run it, it won't work because of those 2 errors that we had before. So it'll be my responsibility by the time we start class tomorrow to figure out those 2 errors. If you remember when we ran this, we got 2 errors. And I'm going to have to try to fix those so we can get all this stuff to at least try to take a look at it for tomorrow. All right. But I'm going to do a file, save all. And I wanted to see one last thing here. That is in movies. Okay. We're going to, I think, have a problem eventually in here. All right. Yeah, cons movies, that's all fine. But I think we're going to have to change this. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think we're going to say here, export default movies. So change that one. All right, because I think if we don't, we're going to have an error later. All right, I can't tell you because we can't test it because we have those errors. All right, so I'm going to do a file, save all, and now everything is closed. Okay, so what do we want to do next? Well, what we want to do is, believe it or not, we've just created a bunch of data. We've got 10 movies and we've got 3 users. And what we can do is we can use those as what's called seeder data, SEEDER. So we would seed the database with data. All right. That way, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to add things and remove them as we want to add things and remove them. All right. So in our backend folder, because all this database stuff is being done on the back end here, I'm going to right mouse click and create a new file that I'm just going to call seeder.js. and we're going to create that. But I do want to mention one thing. When we get to the point where we don't need to be adding data to begin with anymore, this file, you should get rid of it. This is just basically a test type of file that we're using in here. All right, so there's going to be a bunch of imports. Remember, we need the .js in here. We also need our models. I think we called it order and not orders, but we'll find out right now. All right. So those, at the beginning, to start with at least, that's what we want to do. All right. So we're bringing all of that stuff in. Then we want to say .env.config. We want to again call our connection to the database. And again, we'll have to fix that hopefully by tomorrow. When we start class, we'll get that value that's going to go into the .env file. And now we can come in here and do a bunch of stuff. This is almost, at least in a way, I think, this is going to be the first time we're going to be adding something that is going to at least somewhat look like some of the code that we put in when we were working with MongoDB. All right. So this is going to be for us to be able to import data. Let me move that down, move this up. Again, since we're working in a database, all right, we're going to be using try catch. Okay. All right. If there's any stuff in the database, we want to immediately start by removing it. So we're going to say await order dot delete many. That's just going to remove anything that's anything that's in there. Await movie dot delete many, and await user dot delete many. Technically, we don't need the first one of those in there because we don't have any order information. We didn't put any in, but you never know. We could start and go and add some later. It won't hurt anything to leave that in there. So what that line should be doing now, what line 19 should be doing is it should be going in there for us and basically adding to the database to the users table that we're going to have. I shouldn't even say table, the users collection that we're going to have. It should add those 3 users. We want to make sure that the first one, okay, is our administrator. ID. And of course, that's an equal sign, not a minus sign. There we go. Now, if you look at that, you may find lines 23 through 25 a little confusing. But basically what we're doing in lines 23 through 25 is we're letting the system know that to every movie in our movies table, we have the first user that's in there is going to be an administrator. So again, she or he would have the right to go in and make changes. All right, change the price or do whatever. All right. We'll just let the user know that the data has been imported. And we will exit normally, which is just a process dot exit with no number in there. If there's an error, on the other hand, we're going to log the error. So we're going to say console dot error. We'll let the user know what that error was. And we'll do a process dot exit, but we'll give it a number, which basically signifies that there was some kind of a problem like that. All right. Now that's half of our battle here. We're not done yet. All right. But what that is going to do is every time we run this, we're going to have two different things that we're going to be able to do when we run our seed. It depends on how we run it. When we run it and basically pass it this, we'll be adding data in. Well, the opposite of adding data in will be to destroy data. So we're going to write another one in here for destroying data, and it'll be about, I don't know, 15 or 20 lines, something like that. Okay. So basically what this is, and you probably already know it, but I just want to be sure. Basically what we have here is we're writing a file that's going to automatically add these 10 movies in for us and these 3 users, or destroy them on command. All right. So we will constantly have seed data, SEED data, that we'll be able to work with. All right. Now, it's going to be pretty close in a lot of ways to what we just did. So I am going to copy everything here. It's not totally the same, of course, but I'm going to just copy everything in and start making some changes. All right. So let's see. First thing I want to do is the same. I want to delete all that. All right, but I'm not adding anything. So really about all I have to do in here is I can get rid of all this and just put in a console.log and say data has been destroyed. Like that. And what else do we want to do in here? Let's see. Okay, that's our try. Let me get rid of all this and then just process.exit. I guess I could have left that line. I had it in there already. So process.exit. All right, catch error, do the same thing we did before. All right, so that's our destroy. This down a bit. But we need to have a way to let the user know when we run this command, do we want it to create data or do we want it to destroy data? All right, I want to say that again. We have to have a way of when we run this CEDAR file, we have to let the system know, do we want it to call the import data or do we want it to call the destroy data? And again, there's different ways that this can be done. All right. But when you pass things in, when you do pass things in, you're passing them in from the command line. All right. And you know this kind of stuff, but what I'm telling you is it's like if I was, let me just move this up. If I was here and I came down to the terminal, that's the command line basically. So in other words, do I want to call it like this eventually? You'll see it in a minute, but do I want to say node, backend, CEDAR? Because if we do that, it's going to call the import. But if I do this, it's going to call the destroy. So it's going to be which one of those. The point is, this is, whoops, sorry. This right here is what matters. I don't know why it's doing that, but it is. And that is this thing, that minus D. All right. And what we're saying there is, well, what argument is in there? This is argument one. Actually, argument one is the name of the folder. I'm sorry, that's argument 0. That's argument 1. This is argument 2 right here. All right. And if I confused you again, we just have to let the system know which one of these we want to have run. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in this. If process.argv, and that's an argument vector. All right. If that is triple equal to minus D, well, then we know we want to call the destroy. All right. So then we want to call destroy data. Else, we want to call the import data. Just like that. Okay. Now, in the package.json for our back end here, for our package.json, all right, where we are right here, do a file, save all, and close this. So I want to be in the back end, in our package.json right there. Well, what do we have to do? Well, we have to give it those routes or whatever you want to call them. All right. We've got all these in here, but we don't have anything for that. So we've got to add those. So after the last one that I currently have in here, I'm going to add 2 more. Data, import, and that'll be node, backend, CEDAR, and it's giving me that error probably because at the end of this, I didn't put a comma. There you go. And then we'll have one more, and that'll be data destroy. Destroy. And that will be node backend CEDAR minus D. All right. Now, talk about, because we're just about finished for today. So let's talk about where we are, what we got to do, and where we're going to go tomorrow. All right. Well, right now, hopefully I get those errors fixed. And after we do, hopefully at least, this stuff is really starting to come together. I mean, there's so much code, there's so much to do here, all right, that you might feel really overwhelmed. And as you can see, there are so many places where you can possibly come up with an error, all right? But what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do tomorrow are a couple of things. Okay. First of all, go back into Mongo and find out that path so we can put that in there for that the MongoDB URI. Then see if we can run this, and if it'll create some data for us, then we'll see if we can destroy that data. All right. Like I said, and then fix those other errors that we had. If we can do all that, then the idea is next we're going to go on and we're really going to try to make this a MERN project. And what do I mean? Well, right now you may or may not remember we have two routes. So if I go back up here, in fact, let me do a file save all. Let me close this. But if I go in here to my back end and I go to my server.js, or come on, open up. There you go. Right now, these are the only two routes that I have right there. All right. The good news is there's something there. All right. The bad news is, first of all, that's not really the way that you're supposed to do things. You already know this. We will create a routes folder. All right. And we will put those routes into a routes folder and then basically create a link in here to that routes folder. Very similar to what we did before. All right. Then after we get done with that, we're going to look at Postman. And I know you've already done Postman, but we've never really looked at Postman. And if you say I have no idea what you mean, I'm going to suggest, all right, that if you get time between now and tomorrow, and I realize everybody's busy, okay, but that you go out to YouTube, all right, and I looked at a bunch of these yesterday, but the one I liked the most was I think it was called Postman in 15 minutes or something like that. Okay. Because it was about 15 minutes long. And I started to watch this one. I watched most of it, and it's good. I'm not going to say it's fantastic, but it's good. And there's a lot of things in Postman that we've never looked at before. We brought up Postman, but as an example, if I just bring it up right here, hopefully you remember this from when we've looked at it before. All right. But we haven't really used it to its full capabilities. What do I mean? Well, as an example, way up here in the upper right-hand corner, it says no environment. All right. But one of the things you can do is you can click in there and you can actually add variables. Why would you want to do that? Because as an example, we could grab this if we wanted to, and we could make it an environment variable. Let's just say we called it URL, because that's what it is. So then rather than having to type that in all the time, you only have to type in URL. All right. Plus you can come in here and you can create what are called collections. Okay. And the idea behind that is you can save what it is you're working with. All right. And that way you don't have to constantly be going back and recreating and putting in the same stuff over and over and over again. So we'll come into collections and we'll make a new collection. And then after we do, we'll right mouse click on that collection and we'll make, for example, we will make some folders. We might make a folder that we call gets or something like that. And we could put our get all or our get a single one in there, make another one that's called post and put a post in there, make another one that we call put and another one that we call delete, etc. It's not that you have to do that, but it just really brings some order to whatever it is you're working with. So what I'm going to ask is that for tomorrow, all right, is that you come in and try to watch this, learn Postman in 15 minutes. I'm going to keep this here, all right? But again, what I will do Okay, see, like I said, the sound on it is pretty good. All right. And the person might have an accent, but I think that English is their first language. It's fairly easy to understand and it looked fairly complete. All right. So we will look at that tomorrow as well. All right. And then we're going to go in and talk a little bit more. You may or may not remember this about middleware. And the thing I want you to understand about middleware is we're going to write our own middleware and we're going to take control over some of the stuff that happens. What do I mean? Well, you may or may not remember this, but if we're in Postman, let's say, and we put in this, all right, and I click send, all right, and it comes back, well, that isn't very good, but some of these things you've seen before where you get errors in there and you get a bunch of HTML. And it's like, that's really not very helpful. We're going to go in and we're going to write our own error handler. So when stuff happens, okay, that you aren't expecting, that we get an error that'll tell us exactly what went wrong. All right. So that's what you have to look forward to, for lack of better words, tomorrow. And if we can go on from there, we'll just go on and we'll keep going. All right. So hopefully I'll have a chance, like I said, to go back and I save that. So I'm going to go look at that. All right, it looks in here like under components, I may not have a rating.js. Okay, and in here, movie screen is not defined. So I'll have to take a look at that and all the stuff that's in here. All right, hopefully I can get that done and we'll start with that then tomorrow and we'll take it from there. All right, I said I'd keep you till about 2:15. I've got it's just about to click over to 2:14, so that's pretty close. All right, so with all that, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day.